My name is Vanessa. I am 25 years old. I live alone in a small apartment in the city. Every day is the same. I wake up, go to my office job, come home, eat dinner alone, and go to sleep. Then I do it all again the next day. I am not unhappy, but sometimes on quiet evenings, I looked out the window and thought, is this really everything? My ex-boyfriend had left me because he said I was too ordinary with no future. Those words stayed with me. After that, I stopped believing in love based on money or status. If I ever loved someone again, I wanted it to be real. Not because he was rich or successful, but because of who he truly was. One day, I went into a cafe near my office to get out of the rain. I sat down at a table by the window and waited. A waiter came toward me. He was wearing old clothes that were a little too big for him. He carefully carried a cup of hot coffee, but then his foot caught the edge of the table. The cup tilted. Coffee spilled onto my jacket. His face turned red. He said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Let me get a cloth right away." I looked up at him. He stood there with such an honest, worried expression that I could not feel angry. Instead, I laughed. I said, "It's okay. It wasn't that hot." His name was Charles. He cleaned the table and brought me a fresh coffee free of charge as an apology. We began talking. Charles was funny and easy to talk to. I felt comfortable with him right away, but there was something strange about him. Once, I asked him the price of a pastry. Charles calculated the total in his head instantly, fast and accurate, like someone used to handling large numbers. Charles lived in an old car parked outside. He had no home and very little money. But every time I talked to him, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like I could just be myself. I started going to the cafe every day. I told myself it was because the coffee was good, but honestly, I just wanted to see Charles. My family and friends did not understand. They were worried. My best friend called me. She said, "Vanessa, he has no home and no money. What kind of life can he give you?" I knew they cared about me, but I also knew they were looking at the wrong things. One evening, we sat in Charles' old car. Charles took my hand. He looked into my eyes and said, "Vanessa, I don't have much to give you. Just this old car and my job at the cafe. But I love you. I really do. Will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes. My heart felt so happy. I said, "Yes, of course, yes." A few weeks later, we got married at the church. I wore a simple white dress from a second-hand shop. Charles borrowed a suit from his friend. There was no diamond ring. There was no big party. But it was the happiest day of my life. We lived together in my small apartment. Charles cooked dinner in the evenings. I washed the dishes. We sat at our kitchen table and talked late into the night. We talked about our dreams, about the future. Life was not easy. We did not have much money, but we were happy. Sometimes Charles had strange moments. He would watch a business news program on TV and say something very accurate, like an expert. Then he would stop and look at me. He said, "I don't know why I know that." I just smiled and held his hand. I loved him no matter who he had been in the past. One afternoon, Charles came to my office to bring me lunch. He was also carrying a single red rose, simple and sweet, just like him. My boss walked past. He saw Charles and stopped. His face turned pale. He looked from Charles to a magazine on his desk. On the cover was a photo of a man in an expensive suit looking serious and powerful. My boss said, "It can't be Charles Smith, the missing Smith." I froze. The world stopped. Charles Smith, my husband, the cafe waiter who lived in an old car, was actually a famous billionaire. He had disappeared 5 years ago after a car accident. Charles had lost his memory completely. He had not known who he was. Within a few days, our quiet life was gone. Reporters surrounded our building. Charles' name appeared in every newspaper, and his uncle, Victor Smith, arrived with a wide smile in front of the cameras, but cold eyes when he looked at me. We had to leave our small apartment and move into the Smith family house. The house was very big. Everything in it was expensive, but it felt cold and empty. Charles' uncle, Victor, began his plan slowly. He filled Charles' schedule with business meetings. He brought strangers to tell Charles stories about his life before. And when they were alone, Victor said, "Charles, are you sure she really loves you? Or does she just want your money now that she knows who you are?" Charles became distant. He came home late. He spoke less. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with doubt. Something that I had never seen before. One evening, Charles was sitting alone in the living room. I looked at him. I said, "I miss the old Charles." He said nothing. That was the first night I cried alone. A month later, Victor called a meeting. All the directors of the company were present. I sat in the room, not knowing what was about to happen. Victor stood at the front and began. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Smith is no longer capable of running this company. He has lost his memory. He married a stranger who has no connection to our business world. This was a mistake, and it must be corrected." Then he put a series of photographs on the screen. Charles and a beautiful woman at a restaurant walking together in the city, kissing under the sky. Victor said she was Charles's girlfriend before the accident, someone far better than me. The room filled with noise. Charles sat there, his face white. He could not say anything. He did not remember. He did not know if the photos were real or fake. I looked at my husband. I looked at the screen. I looked at Victor, who was smiling like he had already won. I was completely alone. It felt lost. Victor was about to ask the board to vote. At that exact moment, the door opened. It was the woman from the photographs. My heart stopped. The woman said she was an actress that Victor had paid, and every photograph was fake. And then came the most shocking truth. Hospital records showed that Victor himself had taken Charles, who was still alive after the accident, to a distant hospital under a false name. Victor had done it to erase Charles' identity and take control of the entire company. Victor jumped to his feet. He said, "This is all lies. It's not true." But the evidence was clear. I stood up. I said, "Charles did not lose his mind when he fell in love with me. He was simply being his true self, the person that money and power had hidden for a long time." Charles looked at me with love in his eyes. He stood up and walked toward me. He took my hand in front of everyone. The security took Victor out of the room. Charles slowly recovered his memories. The cold, big house slowly became warmer. There was laughter in it now. Every evening, Charles still cooked dinner for me because it reminded him of who he really was. If you liked this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.